Are you a scaling SaaS founder?
Ready to make the leap from leading a team to leading an organization? Join us each week as we refill your think tank with actionable tips and strategies from great business minds you know and those who don't know yet. This is SaaS Fuel with your host, 5-time entrepreneur, SaaS founder, and globetrotting adventurer, Jeff Maines.
Welcome back to the SaaS Fuel podcast, where our pricing strategy is like hitting every green light on your morning commute. Smooth, efficient, and sets the tone for a great day ahead. I'm your host, Jeff Maines. I hope B2B SaaS founders like you grow from traction to scale. Here, growth is more than just numbers. It's about crafting a future-proof company, premium valuation, and leaders who build a business of significance while living epic, adventurous lives. What is Pricing SaaS Week here on SaaS Fuel? This is the second half. We had Bill Wilson on Tuesday, and today we've got another guest all about pricing. It's an important topic. Did you know that 80% of SaaS companies are considering dynamic pricing models for 2025? But is dynamic pricing a game-changing opportunity or a risky threat? Let's talk about it. SaaS pricing is evolving, becoming more complex as companies explore new strategies to stay competitive and maximize growth. Today, we'll navigate the complexities of modern SaaS pricing, dynamic models, localization, discounting, subscription fatigue. How many of you have that? And even the ethics of price differentiation. So, what do you think the future of SaaS pricing will look like? And how do we get it right today and tomorrow? So, what is dynamic pricing? That may be a new term for some of you, but essentially, it is where prices adjust in real time based on demand, usage, or market conditions. For example, server costs may be higher during the day versus at night, or more on weekdays than weekends, that kind of thing. It's kind of like Uber or Lyft surge pricing. You probably experienced that. You're at a big event, you want an Uber, and the prices are crazy, or airport. And it's lower at other times. So it fluctuates based on demand. I hear Burger King is maybe experimenting with this. So, different price will operate, peak or off peak times. So it seems kind of weird to me. But lots and lots of pricing experiments across industries. It's not just SaaS. And on the surface, sometimes I think it offers some exciting potential, just like the server cost. But does that make more sense? I don't know. Tailored pricing, greater revenue optimization, and increased flexibility for sure. But I think it also presents some risks. Unpredictable pricing can confuse or frustrate customers, erode trust. Similarly, expanding globally, there's new challenges in that. Companies need localized pricing strategies that reflect different economic realities and purchasing behaviors across regions. So, how do you manage that? These shifts introduce new complexities that, if we don't manage carefully, can create friction rather than opportunity. So, let's go deeper on this. If we look at dynamic pricing, kind of the balance of flexibility and trust. Now, dynamic pricing can definitely optimize revenue by adjusting to customer behavior or market changes, but transparency is key. We're even seeing that in the electric market, free nights and weekends for electricity. It's like, that's kind of weird. Businesses pay more during the day. People, consumers pay more during the day. A lot of us, at least we used to be in the office, not using as much at home, and then freer, or lower cost nights and weekends. So it takes advantage of a dynamic usage-based pricing, just like the AWS example I gave earlier. But at the same time, it has to provide clear documentation and pricing calculators so customers know exactly what to expect. I mean, surprises aren't great. And the key lesson here, I think, is that flexibility is great if customers can trust the system. I personally kind of hate dynamic pricing. I just want to know what it costs, and I want to know what that value is. So let me know what you think in the comments. If you're thinking about this, I want to have you as a guest on the show and kind of talk about dynamic pricing and how you're using it today. The second is pricing and localization for global markets. As SaaS companies expand internationally, one size fits all pricing model, it just doesn't work. We've seen that as companies are going into, Canada, or they're going into Mexico or South America. Very, very different pricing models. Different pricing model in Europe, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, Africa, EMEA. I mean, there's so many places where you really need localized pricing because it has to adapt to economic conditions, local purchasing power. And the idea is you want to get in there and drive adoption for new markets. Netflix, for example, adjusts subscription pricing across countries based on regional income levels. And so it ensures affordability while maintaining profitability globally. YouTube has done that. And what's interesting is there are hacks where you can go and you can get a YouTube premium account for like $1 in some South American country. But then Google finds out and they shut your account down. So there are a lot of challenges with globalization of pricing, and then arbitrage between markets. How do we deal with that? Third is role of discounting in SaaS sales. We're going to talk about discounts. Talked about some of that on Tuesday. We'll do it again today. And discounts are often necessary to close deals, but they need to be strategic. Time limited discounts or incentives tied to longer term contracts can increase customer lifetime value. It's a good thing. But overuse of discounts can devalue your product. Leading with discounts can definitely devalue your product. Now, the most successful SaaS companies use discounts sparingly to reward early commitment or maybe upsell opportunities without eroding the perceived value of their offering. Another way is standing out in a saturated market. Subscription fatigue. I talked about that. That is absolutely real. Who else is tired of having like 100 subscriptions? And I think at last count, we had something along those lines. It's unbelievable. The customers today are overwhelmed by countless SaaS options overall in the market, plus all the ones that we already bought, we're paying monthly subscriptions on or annual subscriptions. I even forget about those sometimes. The offering flexible plans like pay as you go or annual discounts can help differentiate your product and reduce friction. If there's a discount for annual, but then when I buy annual and the product is garbage, then I'm really not happy for a year and got to switch. And but it's not about just offering lower prices, but providing more value and choice to your ideal clients. And finally, the ethics of price differentiation. As pricing becomes more dynamic and personalized, it really gives rise to some ethical concerns. Is it differentiation or discrimination? How do you ensure fairness across customers while offering tailored solutions? Early stage startups, there are companies out there that offer, free, as long as you're early stage and like less than 5 people or something like that, or maybe it's free for 3 months or 6 months. Price differentiation, uh, lower prices for nonprofits. We do this. And I've got another business I'm an investor in where we actually have a product like $25, and we give it to first responders, police, firefighters, public servants, teachers, military. It's free for them. So, it can be a positive force for sure, but transparency is critical to maintain trust and avoid alienating customers who feel like they're unfairly charged or that they're going to be penalized. If it's a startup thing and I grow, now I'm going to be penalized for using this thing. So, how do we balance those ethical considerations with price differentiation? The key takeaway though is successful SaaS companies balance flexibility and consistency. HubSpot actually does this really, really well. They offer localized pricing for different markets, dynamic upgrades as customers grow, and strategic discounts during promotions. Not all the time, but at specific times. Most importantly, and I think this is the key, is maintaining transparency throughout their pricing process. Now, I talked before about going to a website and something was like 5 grand. And I'm like, I don't know, kind of thinking about it. And then I go back and it's 1,500. I'm like, well, I'm glad I didn't buy it 5. Yeah. So it's really that transparency in the pricing process and really understanding what that process is. Take the customers along that journey with you and make sure that they understand the value. Customers have to know what they're paying for. And that trust drives both adoption and loyalty. HubSpot's approach to navigating modern pricing complexity isn't just about adjusting numbers. It's not just like tweaking it for this locality and that one. It's about really aligning value with customer expectations at every single level. Every one of those tiers has a specific value proposition, and there's a reason that you would choose one over another. Very, very well thought out. If you haven't looked lately, go look at their pricing model and think about that and how it relates to what you do, and think about what is the value of this one, why this one, why are these things in this one versus the next one versus the next one. As pricing is more complex for us as founders and leaders, we have to make absolutely sure that it doesn't become that way for our clients. Simplicity and trust win always. How are you navigating the complexities of SaaS pricing? Is it getting easier? Is it getting harder? Is it more complex? Share your experiences in the comments and be sure to subscribe for more insights. Check out the next video for deeper dives into customer retention strategies. Thanks for hanging out this week, SaaS Pricing Week, and let's master the art of SaaS pricing together. Kicking off SaaS Pricing Week on Tuesday was Bill Wilson, founder and CEO of Pace Pricing. We talked about evolving SaaS pricing models, customer value, and overcoming anxiety in pricing changes. That is a huge one. Anybody feel that when we talk about price and rolling out new tiers and changing pricing? I mean, that just makes people's hearts skip a beat. And our expert guest last week was Bradley Hamner, founder of Blueprint OS. We talked about systems, processes, operating systems, and transitioning from working in your business to delegating the in part and working on your business strategically. If you missed either one of those episodes, go back and give them a listen. Good stuff there. Rounding out SaaS Pricing Week, my guest today is Pat Meegan. Pat is managing director at Maple Street IGS, where he leads the pricing consulting practice and develops execution-focused revenue models and packaging recommendations to deliver long-term sustainable growth for clients. With over a decade of experience, Pat combines competitive research, internal analytics, and hands-on client workshops. Welcome, Pat Meegan. Hey, Pat, welcome to SaaS Fuel.
Great to be here. Thanks.
Today is all about pricing, and I would love to hear your journey to becoming, managing director at Maple Street IGS Insights, and what drew you to specialize in pricing consulting.
Yeah, it's not something that everybody ends up in, but most people who are in pricing have had a journey to it. So, early in my career, I was interested in. I spent a lot of years in finance, but really enjoyed the front end of things, the sales side and pricing. And then I migrated over into a selling role, and at which point I had to go negotiate pricing, sell in pricing price increases, and just really fell in love with the that part of the market phasing end of pricing. So, using some of the background I had working at a large consumer products company, it was all about understanding buyers and understanding what drives their purchase motivations. And so it kind of coupled a few of those experiences together, using analytics, using buyer insight, and then the selling process. All of that kind of came together to say, pricing is a combination of those three things that I'm really interested in.
Yeah. So why is it, crucial for SaaS companies to align their pricing with the value that they provide, and how do they effectively communicate that value to their customers?
Yeah, on the first question, one of the things that I see often when SaaS companies are constantly focusing on their product roadmap and they're releasing new features, some of them to address bugs and limitations, but often they're bringing incremental value. They're innovating for their market. But they aren't thinking about it necessarily coupled with how they're monetizing that value. So they're increasing the value they're delivering over time, but they're not syncing it up with how they're charging for it. And so that's the thing that I feel like is the opportunity there, and why it should be in the forefront of coupling that monetization roadmap with the product roadmap is just foundational to SaaS success.
So with that, if it's going to grow with the roadmap, do you like price low and then grow to high, or do you start high and go low? What have you seen that has worked, and why?
Yeah, great question. I've seen both work. There's different tacks, and sometimes you may do it different ways. So, for example, saw an enterprise ed tech company that was selling, their average contract value was in the tens of thousands of dollars. They launched their product and started out high, and then kind of gauged where they needed to bring down to where it was the sweet spot. Not a bad approach. I've seen others who do a one-off testing of say a new product or an add-on that complements what they already have in their portfolio. And the way that they approached it was doing individual customer tests and then doing some interviews and things like that, some market research to understand where to price that. I think it depends on the use case and saying, is this something where it makes sense for us to, I think often it makes sense, usually it makes sense to talk with customers and understand that perception of value. And then you're going to do there's going to be some fine tuning as part of the process. The question is, what's the best approach for the situation? And, but thinking about it at all is a leap forward for where a lot of folks are.
That's true. There's a lot of times we'll set it and then just kind of forget it.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
focus. You think about the equation; it's volume times price on everything you sell. Tons of attention on the volume side, not nearly as much on the
right.
price. Yeah,
And it's just as important because it affects the overall number. If you want to raise revenue, I mean, you can sell more often, you can sell at a higher price, you can sell more units, and we so often focus on just selling more of the thing, and not either of those other two things.
that's right. And so when we see in companies that are advanced in their monetization strategies, they're thinking about multiple ways to monetize. It doesn't just mean taking an annual increase or bumping your price here and there. They're thinking about it in a number of different buckets related to pricing, and they're thinking about how that relates to their innovation, to their selling motion refinements. And having that integrated is really what sets them apart, because they're pulling all the levers rather than just kind of more customers and selling more to existing customers and things like that.
Right. So, how often should founders be reevaluating their pricing strategy?
Here, it should be brought into the executive conversation. I'd say at least every 6 months. If you're bringing a lot of value to the market, if you're making a lot of changes to the rest of your organization and your proposition, or the market's volatile, often it could be more often. It could be 3 months. But what I'd say is it should be part of what's on their mind frequently, and it shouldn't feel like I'm going to think about volume driving activities all the time and pricing periodically. They should be thinking about those and saying, across the levers I've got, what could some of these new things we're focusing on allow us to do? We're beefing up our ability to service our accounts better on our account management side. Well, okay, what does that allow us to do to understand where there's different pockets of value that you could go after, or something that would allow you to chase some value via pricing. Each aspect that they're working on should have some sort of complement, saying where can we extract more value.
Yeah. As founders are thinking, to say we bring this into the executive committee, and this is something that we do every 6 months, what are some dimensions founders need to be thinking about regarding price?
Yeah, one of the first things to consider is it's a muscle to be built, and it doesn't happen overnight. And so, if you think about the first time a team that hasn't talked about pricing starts to talk about pricing, it's going to be a very different conversation than 6 months, 12 months after that, where that muscle is getting stronger and it's getting more dimensions to it, right? So, I think the key thing is to just start including it. But a lot of it that they should be doing is looking at getting some numbers and looking what the market's doing, looking at how your different, say, in a SaaS product that's got packages, looking at some of the packages, how are they performing, looking at your price metric. Is it effective in how buyers buy, and does it scale with them getting more value as they're getting charged more, or is there a disconnect there? And if so, you should start to have conversations about that. And start to think about alternatives, and just kind of breaking it down into pieces. Your contracting. How are your reps doing in handling some of the discounting? That could be things like getting on gong calls and watching how they handle the pricing conversation, which is often a very different outcome than what's being reported back to you as an executive from what the sales team's doing. Is getting there and looking at how things are really playing out.
Yeah, it's really having the 360-degree view of, not just deciding here's what we're going to do, but actually what's working in the real world, and really getting that feedback
Mm-hmm.
of what's happening and what kind of feedback there is from the people on the ground.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because ultimately what you're trying to do is understand the market response to the value you're delivering for the price you're charging. And the only way you're going to get that is by a number of touch points of data and how you collect that, and even, customer calls, or talking with your account management team. Where are the things where people are struggling with value? Where are the things where people really, your ICP is just loving it? What it is that they're loving about it? And so as you're thinking about developing your product further, it should be, and this sounds obvious, but often it's lost as you separate things like product from other parts of the team. Product is very focused on making a fantastic product, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're thinking about monetizing that.
And that's sad when you have something that is a great product, and really good interface, and technically very good, but it doesn't really fit a need in the marketplace, or it doesn't have as much value as you think that it would. So it can be a beautiful product, but that monetization is almost more important
Yeah,
than having the product.
Yeah, having a great product actually should spark a different line of thinking about your pricing overall, because one of the axioms of pricing is you can't overcome a bad product with good pricing, and because
Mm.
you have a value issue, and so you've got to think about your pricing differently when you're at a deficit from a product perspective. But if you're in an advantage, then that opens up a number of opportunities for you that you should be considering. So should I be priced at a premium rather than just with the pack? Should I
Yeah.
be positioning more niche than I am, and really going after some high value use cases because I have something really valuable that the rest of the market has a challenge to match. And if you have you've got a gap, or you're getting bad NPS outcomes and you got some things to fix, well, then until you get some of those things fixed, it's going to limit you on the pricing side too.
So what role does packaging play in pricing? So we have the prices, but how we bring that to market and what goes into each package. How do we decide that?
Yeah, that's an important question. So there's a few different ways to think about it. So when I talked about pricing levers, the more that someone gets in and thinks about their pricing, you're going to start to think about different pieces of them. With packaging being a big one, right? So often the packaging is one that could be, obviously it could be iterative over time, but ultimately you have to put a price on something. So if you have packages, that kind of has to come first before you put a price tag on it. There's different ways to do this, and you'll see some folks will, let's say you have a quantity based package, you get so much of a certain thing, or a couple different tiers of a product. There's also ways to think about it like feature differentiation. You get different features to access or things, or a combination of some additional professional services or whatever. Ultimately, what it's going to come down to is laying out what are the drivers of value. And again, this comes from this could be done internally through cross-functional conversations, some work with customers, some work with prospective buyers, but understanding why is someone even considering your offering? What is it that drives value? And then thinking about that from a use case or a persona basis, and what's different. So if I'm selling to an educational institution versus a government versus a business user, or a different type of business user, and understanding those different use cases, then allows you to say, how do I solve this problem differently with this basket of assets that I have in this product? How can I configure it to meet a need? But then the second part is, say I build 3 packages, could be 5, could be 4, could be 2 in some cases. Could be a la carte in some cases because it makes sense. But if I'm going to build for those cases, then I also want to think about it from another dimension and say, how do I then, if they buy this package, is it the only thing that fits them, or should they should have some choice in there, so that because often people will think, well, it's a small customer, they get a small package. Well, so you have small buyers who often will buy the premium item, because they value the things that get in the premium package. So, and then do I have an expansion path? Right. So you think about packaging, it's not just getting that initial sale. It's did I package in a way that there's almost nothing left after they buy the basic product? That's a common thing I run into, is too much in the base package. And so does it make sense, or am I just kind of throwing everything else into the next package? And so there's not really tension to drive them to buy the next. I want to be thinking about, how do I drive that expansion over the lifetime of the buyer?
Yeah, I think you hit on something really, really important there, and that's really kind of the use case, and you're building it for to solve a specific problem, and then the next package is designed to solve a higher level problem, some different problem, or add something more. It could be more intel, it could be more visibility, it could be a deeper solution. But really thinking about that in terms of what problem am I trying to solve, not just like, here's a bunch of stuff and here's a bunch more stuff, and it's cooler because there's more stuff.
Yes. Yeah, it only matters if they value those things that are in the higher level package, whether they're all going to, and you see this sometimes. I remember working with a company a couple of years ago, 99% of people were buying the bottom package. And they had 2 other packages, but there was no reason to trade up whatsoever because of how the price metric was designed, or that metric on which they were ascribing value. And this is something where you often see this now. Your pricing model and your packaging work together, obviously. But if you're looking at you have kind of an input based model, which is like users or clicks or something like that, and then you have an output based, which is trying to approximate that increment of value when your buyer gets more value from your product. And nirvana is being able to price at that increment, and often being able to slide across that continuum from those inputs where it's like, it's easy to know how many people are on your product. But let's say for an AI product or something that you're working on, I was recently working with a team that had a product they wanted to get a lot of people in the organization using, but they were pricing
Okay.
on user. So they created this hurdle. So
Yeah.
so they're like, oh, I don't want to have that many people on because it keeps my costs down. But as a company, they want more people on it because they can see the value of it and spread throughout, the adoption throughout the organization. So you got to think about, am I limiting some of my growth just by how I'm pricing?
Yeah. So what do you think about tying pricing to a specific value metric within a client? So, I mean, whether it's usage-based pricing or something similar to that, would that be a better solution in that case?
Absolutely. If you can find one that resonates with buyers, so sometimes you'll see some interesting metrics out there. The acid test is usually if a salesperson's talking to someone or it's on your website, depending on your motion, and people are getting it, how it connects to their value. That's usually where you run into the issues. Is yes, I could get to a really obscure set of 3 metrics that really captures the value, but is it intuitive to a buyer to say, yeah, I don't know how to get that information, or I can get that info and it makes sense why you're asking me that? That's usually where you run it. So then you kind of have to, when I mentioned the continuum, it's kind of like, okay, Rhonda's over here, but maybe if I can get closer to this side, I can get a lot of benefit from the user base. But it's not perfect by any measure, but it better approximates value. So that's one of those things when you talk about an executive team getting in and starting to talk about their pricing. One of the things you're going to be talking about is does our metric and our pricing approach, does it track well to value? And if not, then start thinking through alternatives and combinations of alternatives that might work better. And often someone in the sales team is already has the idea, and because they are talking to these people all the time and they get these reactions. This is again why I like to watch gong calls, because you can see these people, these sales recordings where you can see people react to how the price is coming together, and whether they're scratching their head or whether it's just like resonating. Yep, I got it. Let's go. There's a really important interaction that happens in those calls that you kind of gut check how you're performing.
Yeah. That's really, really smart to be looking at those and the reaction.
Mm-hmm.
How is it, what is it looking like in the marketplace? How is it being perceived?
Yeah.
And is it something that resonates with them? I mean, we rolled out, pricing that was usage based, and it was really different because everybody else was selling seats. It was all user pricing,
Mm-hmm.
and our seat price was 0. We wanted everybody using it, and it was all usage based. But then, it was a little bit of a hurdle to overcome because they never thought about it in those terms before.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, I don't know how many I need. I don't know, which one to select. So, kind of thinking through that, and what do you do if there's a disconnect? You test something, and your target market is going, I'm not really sure what I think about that. How do we connect the dots for them?
Yeah, 2 things I would say. So you hit on a really important point about if you're changing a price metric, you also need to think about how do I enable either my website or my sales team to translate that really well to the market, because they're telling a different story now, right? And this is often the conversation when you're shifting metrics or models, is the sales team's like, hey, this is the story I've been telling. It doesn't line up here. So we need to rework that and design how the pitch is going to be in anticipation of anchoring your selling differently. So that's one part of it. When you get into it and there's markets not accepting some of the metric, there's usually some good indicators. So part of it is like, okay, first, is this an issue where we're not delivering it effectively, or is it a problem where it's actually the wrong metric and it's not landing because of value? You want to kind of analyze that and say, what's actually the problem I'm facing? And there's different indicators for each. If the sales team is struggling to explain it, you're going to see buyers who are just kind of spinning a little bit on the explanations. And this is what you see. And I've seen this a number of times where they're talking to them and they keep asking these questions that figure out how the model works versus like why that's even the model at all. So if you're having an issue, and this is one I saw not too long ago, where a buyer was actually expressing their frustration, saying, "Hey, I'm actually shopping across 3 other similar organizations. They're all really easy to buy from. You guys are really hard to buy from." That's usually a model.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they were just really forward about it, and it was helpful for me as we were doing a redesign to say, okay, what are the things they're liking about others? Now, a user-based model is really easy to understand, but it doesn't mean that it's they're having additional complexity is worthwhile if it's trading off for more revenue potential. But if you just have more complexity, but it doesn't trade off for revenue potential, that's a place that you probably need to look harder.
Yeah. Well, what are some common mistakes founders make when it comes to pricing?
Okay, first, from a packaging perspective, I mentioned putting all the meat in all the value in that base package is one that as soon as I'm looking at packaging, it's one of the first questions I'm going to ask is, I look at and understand the value. Is there so much in your bottom package that there's no reason to trade up? Another is to look at the price metric, and then they need to be thinking about how does it, and just kind of set the pricing model aside and just think about it from a buyer and user perspective and say, what outcome do we generate? What value do we generate? What benefit do we generate when someone's using our product? And I would push them to say, because usually in SaaS, I mean, there's this kind of hard and fast rule that talking about time savings is something that comes up so often in sales pitches. But that's one of those things that's kind of ethereal, and you're like, I can't really cash that in a lot of ways. Right. So going a step beyond that and thinking about it from, are there quantifiable ROIs, even if it was estimated, what's the real value? And ways you can ask this are things like, if you didn't have our product, what would you do instead? What are the, when you went to buy this product, what were the alternatives you considered? How are you thinking about, if you're going to use internal resources, how are you thinking about solving it, right? So you're figuring out what that real consideration set is that they used in making that decision. So the more you understand that, then you go back and you look at your package in a new light and you're saying, okay, here's the problems I'm solving. Let me line this up against the benefits of solving problems and benefiting the organization to the goals that they have in terms of growth or whatever it is that matters to them. Efficiency, could be a lot of times it's actually revenue producing, and teams don't take credit for it. There's several that I've worked with where they're talking about kind of technical benefits that an IT person may perceive, but actually the bigger benefit is you could drive revenue off of this stuff. And so considering where's the source of that value? And then the other part is I really like to just ask salespeople and sales leaders and just say, where do you feel like there's money being left on the table? It doesn't solve the problem, but it starts to identify some areas where, maybe we need to address this. It's like, hey, we're putting a lot of professional services in here, and they really love what we're doing. It's great for retention, but man, it feels like there's a lot of value that's just left on the table here.
That's really good. Just asking the question, because once you do that, they start thinking about it, they start looking for it, and they start seeing things that they probably wouldn't see if you hadn't asked to start with.
Yep. And that's why when I say, that as they're building that muscle, that conversation changes so much and becomes so much richer because they're thinking about that in all the different facets of their business. And they realize it's not just the price tag they're putting on. There's a lot of facets that need to be worked on in the course of, a year of development and maturing your business.
Ready to dominate your market and skyrocket your revenue? Dive into Small Fish, Big Pond, building a world-class business that swims circles around competitors. This book is packed with powerful marketing and leadership insights guaranteed to transform your business and operate world-class. Small Fish, Big Pond delivers proven strategies to sharpen your marketing message, deliver unmatched value to your clients, and guide your prospects' buying journey to one inevitable conclusion: that your company is the only solution for them. Inside, you'll find step-by-step frameworks and time-tested growth principles to attract your ideal clients, convert them, and then transform them into your passionate brand ambassadors. Get your copy today in print, ebook, or audio at smallfishbigpond.com or on Amazon. Plus, remember, every book sale supports charity. And this month, next month is all about hurricane relief in North Carolina and Florida. So dive in and help us make a difference. So let's say, an executive team goes through the process. Okay, we need to raise prices. What do you do with the ones that are on an existing plan? Do you force them to go up? Do you leave them there forever? What's your take?
Yeah, this hits on the number one fear of why people don't touch pricing is that the fear.
Absolutely.
Right. So this is
they're going to leave if I change the price.
Yes, there's kind of two camps. It's like, for the most part, there's two camps. One is that, hey, we've done pricing moves before, it's worked really well, or we've learned some things and figured out how to do it. Others are like, I don't want to touch it because I'm afraid I'm going to lose all my customers. And really, the fear is overstated because there's a few things I can do, right? if you know you need to raise prices, say for whatever reason, could be that you've got way more value than you're monetizing, or you're being forced to because of your costs, or you just haven't in a while and it's time to do it. A lot of different reasons come up. Then first I want to think about it and say, how can I differentiate from the way that I do this across my customer base? One of the biggest mistakes we see, and this is common, is to just take a broad brush approach. Everybody's up 15%. And the challenge there is some people actually may be able to go higher than that, and some of your accounts may not be able to go that much. And so now I'm thinking about it from a B2B perspective versus like a consumer type of PLG motion SaaS. So let's use the sales, the existing customer motion. But either way, you can do that. You can execute this differently for the different segments. But the idea is, if I have some indicators of account health that are not that strong and usage is low, and kind of things that they might be on the brink of churning, I probably shouldn't be as aggressive with those as I am with some others. If I have some others who are, they get immense value and they're using it a ton, and there's a fantastic relationship, and you're really delivering value, oftentimes those can take a stronger price increase, partly because they're also consuming more value. And so, creating a few different buckets based on some of the insight you have from those accounts will serve you very well in a rollout. It is when people take a broad brush approach that run into things like, hey, we did lose a bunch of accounts. The first question I get when someone said, hey, we took price up before we lost a bunch of accounts, I'm like, how did you do it? And it's usually because it was kind of yes fits all.
Yeah. And I guess another question is, is that a bad thing? Did you want those accounts? Are those things that are in your sweet spot? Or are they deals that you sold at the very beginning when you were just looking for warm bodies?
Yeah, so that's a good point too.
Value there?
Yeah, because a lot of times you have these legacy accounts, and this is something that's kind of a sleeper opportunity. A lot of times is you have these large accounts that were signed early, but if they were to come in the door today, they would be at 2x, 3x, or whatever the number is, their current price. And so these are accounts that really value a lot of times your product. So going back and thinking about, okay, what's our strategy here? Is it a multi-year approach? Is it a product-based approach where we resell them to something that adds more value that we know that they could benefit from? There's a decision to be made by the customer in terms of, hey, if we've changed, this goes back to your earlier question, if we've changed pricing and packaging, it's an opportunity to resell to some accounts to say, hey, you could actually benefit from a broader, higher price package, more for more, versus just saying, okay, we're gonna either grandfather or take their pricing up. Then I think there's often, and I've seen this a number of times, is if you try to resell people when you make some of the pricing package changes, often you can get some of those accounts out of their current contract into a new one, which gives you a lot more freedom than having to wait 2-3 years until you can come back on the renewal.
And that makes a lot of sense. And I've seen that work really well, where you add a new feature, a new layer, kind of redo the packages, and take somebody kind of on the middle and say, hey, this is going up, but what we can do is you can move up to that new price, and we'll give you access for 3 months, 6 months to that higher level tier also, which just gives them a path to that next acceleration.
Yeah, and there's clever things that can be done there too. For instance, it's like, hey, we're taking, there's different ways to position it in different situations. One way that can be effective sometimes is to say the prices are going up, in this case, 10%. But at 15%, based on where you are, you get up into this next package and actually get a whole lot more value, right? So you can use some of those anchoring tactics in how you position an increase, because either way you're going up 10%, but at least, another 5 points, and you'd be getting a lot more additional capability.
So what do you think about like naming and positioning on pricing? So sometimes, a test is done. And so, you have an existing customer, and there was one, I was actually thinking about buying a solution. I went to the website, and they had their packages, and I think it was like 1,500 and then 5,000. Like, well, I want the 5,000, but I'm not going to pay that. I don't really want to do the 1,500. And then I wait a little while and I go back, and now that 1,500 is now 250. And the one I wanted is 1,500. It's like, well, now it's a no-brainer. But if I was an existing customer, I would really feel taken advantage of had I bought at that $5,000 price point.
Yeah, you bring
so
up
how do you recommend like the naming and positioning when you're changing pricing or even just testing?
Yeah. So an important point about testing here, and this is exactly the downside of A/B testing on your website. It does play a role, but I think part of it is, was this a better thing to be tested not in a production environment, but actually like off on the side via market research? Could you have done this?
Probably.
Yeah, probably, right? And so the risk is lower. It's not live data, but man, to have that kind of whiplash for prospects to see that really destroys credibility, and you don't want to lose trust before they've even bought from you. And then you
Right.
also you think about how that happens. You go back, you're like, well, what actually, like, am I wrong in interpreting the value of this package? Because, like, I was almost, I was thinking of buying this one at this price, but now it's, way lower than that. And you just kind of get confused. And I wouldn't be surprised if you started shopping elsewhere, a little stronger than you had otherwise. So A/B testing, I would say,
Yeah.
use it. Often can be used to refine. When you're doing a lot of price changes, there's a role to say, okay, what should be done via market research and what's via A/B test. What I've seen be really effective is teams use the fine tuning. The fine tuning is done often through A/B testing. So, you think about, you asked about naming. You want the name to reflect, make it easy for people to find the package that fits them. And sometimes I think I've seen some of these, be really intuitive. Others will kind of go a generic route. I tend to go kind of a more generic route rather than getting really cute about it, partly so that people can easily understand, this is more than the other one. An enterprise, it's like, okay, well, that's a big organization or whatever. Or if it's, in this case,
Right.
starter, advanced, or essentials and pro, or things like that. What gets confusing sometimes is they'll use names and you can't, it's like, okay, is professional or pro, or is pro or business higher or lower? Like, so they're trying to make it easy so they can intuitively see, what role it plays in the portfolio. Or if it's like for a use case, sometimes that can be really beneficial where you name it so you understand what it's used for, versus it just kind of being a generic package name.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I had one a few months ago, and it was with or without AI, and so it was pro, like essentials, and then pro and essentials plus and pro plus and enterprise, and it's like I just had to message them like, I don't understand what comes in these things,
Mm-hmm.
and they got back to me, and it was clear to them, but even after the explanation, it wasn't super clear to me. And so, it's just one of those things of the names, and making it a lot more confusing than it needed to be.
Yeah, and that's also good feedback to take. If you're on the the CS team, or you're a sales rep, and you're getting people coming back saying that I don't know how to navigate this myself, but it's designed to self navigate. That's concerning. Should we relook at some of these packages? Yeah, something you'll also see large organizations do. They'll have their product and their pricing around. They'll have their packaging and their naming, but they'll test it regularly. They'll try different things. But one of the challenges that comes with that too is tracking the product performance after the fact. So if you look at the data set of someone who's been changing their names, you want to be careful about it, because you may have 3 different versions of premium, and that you got one that you sold a year and a half ago. It's a different product now, and so you want to be thinking about names in the context of, how do I actually track my business performance?
Mm.
Because on the back end, it can get really blurry really fast.
Yeah, definitely could. So what do you think about discounting? It seems like that's happening more and more. So even product-led growth, there's a price on there, and then if you move your mouse off the screen, you get a pop-up box,
Yeah,
and now it's 20% less. Um, so what do you
yeah.
think about discounts, and what is the right way to use those?
Yeah, and I think your last comment is spot on. Is they need to serve a purpose. Okay, if you think about how a buyer is going about shopping, and we'll use a consumer case and we'll use a B2B case. So consumers tend to be, they're often shelling out their own money for something, and so there tend to be some people who are going to be very price sensitive, where price is the primary criterion. In a B2B setting, price is always important, but usually the value is the primary criterion. They're trying to solve a problem and they need to buy something to do it. And
Yes.
but whereas a consumer is like, nah, this is a nice to have. I'm spending my own money. So price plays a different role in that B2B context often than the B2C. That's broad brushing it, but usually that's kind of how it acts. So what I would do is, to the extent I can be targeted about discounts. That's how I prefer to do it. If you're going to get people into a marketing flow, say on a consumer website, a PLG Motion or something like that, can I use some of that? And I recently went through a project on it was some legal software, and one of the companies did a really nice job of kind of reading how I responded to their emails over time, and we're serving up different offers. But there was no offer on their site, partly because as soon as you flash up that that you need to discount to get the sale, it brings into question your price that you went out with to begin with. You're saying, well, instantly
Right.
it wasn't worth that, and it must be that price is what's driving, not the value, the decision on this. And you don't really
Right.
want that. Now, if you're a challenger
it's real.
versus a leader, it may be different.
I think that it's really interesting, just the psychology behind that, and what does it signal to the buyer when the discount is that instant?
Yes. Yeah. And it also creates this situation where you're training people to do certain behaviors. So there's some websites where you put stuff in a cart, and then if you just wait long enough, they're going to start serving up discounts to you. And
I do that all the time.
Yeah, I do it all the time. If you shopped enough, it's like, I want this thing, but I don't need it today. So
Yep.
I'll get about 10-15% in the next week, and I'll buy it. So
Yep.
on the B2B side, there's a different consideration, right? Because you have a person in the loop, and they're making an evaluation, right? And so a discount can play a role. Enterprise tends to have bigger discounts. That's just kind of how a lot of enterprise SaaS is. So when you're setting your pricing, you need to be building in anticipation of some discounting, but you need to have some guardrails. And it's something we see often. I see this all the time where a sales rep will say, yeah, I've got latitude to discount what I need to close the deal. If I go and talk to my manager, I pretty much get approved whatever I tell them I need. And so that creates some really bad behaviors, because there needs to be, I use the word tension because, you need to be balancing profitability of an account, revenue integrity of an account versus getting the deal won. And if it's kind of a rubber stamp process, what ends up happening is, in the absence of that tension, you end up undervaluing some deals because no one's pushing you back. And and a rep may go for it. I'd rather take a smaller amount guaranteed than the maximum amount that I could be getting. And so that's part of having a good process for approvals / kind of deal desk.
So how do we know when the price is right? And what are the indicators that tell us that?
Yeah, there's going to be, so the best indicator you can have is someone complains and buys anyway. They don't love the price, but they still bought because the value's there. That tells you that you're getting toward the top of their willingness to pay. Okay, if they're willing to be to still buy, the value that they're perceiving still exceeds the price, but it's kind of uncomfortable. It hurts a bit more than they'd like to be spending. If it's kind of quiet and everyone's, your win rate starts to get really high, and that win rate varies. There's not just like one benchmark. But if you get a super high win rate and you're willing to go, as low as you need to on everything, you're probably leaving some room for improved discounting. And then on the flip side, like, you're too high and you're not, you're not in the right range, is usually going to be the people are dropping out early in the process. As soon as they hear your price, they just go silent, to an extent that would be, out of line. That means you're probably just not even in the right range.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And just being able to read the reaction and understand that. So if we're not in the right range, how do we find that? What kind of research do you recommend? Obviously not just going and copying what competitors are doing.
Yep.
But how do we find that sweet spot?
Yeah, some of it can be done through the discovery process. Let's say, let's use a B2B example, and just a lot of times, if your reps are collecting information, they'll understand who it is that is they're competing with. Sometimes they can even get some information about what the quote range is that they're getting from competitors. Not always, but over time, a lot of these anecdotes come in and become helpful. But also, there's a piece of sometimes, if you feel like you're in the wrong range, you have some indicators of where you should be. either through some market research or gathering some information. Maybe you hired somebody from a competitor, and some of that information came out. Not saying that they should share that legally, but sometimes that stuff comes out, and they learn some things about where the rest of the market is. So what can often work when you go to make some of that change is to say, well, let's take a couple of average or better reps and try them out on a different price pilot and see how that performs over, say, 3 months. We're going to track our key metrics. Is our win rate changing in the way we need it to based on this price? And let's say our win rate is abysmal and it's starting to get better. Our days to close are getting better. Some other indicators, your ACV, a few things that would be just really good benchmarks that you'd kind of watch and say, okay, and we've done this with some clients before where designed this pilot, and they went out and after a couple months, it was so successful, then rolled it out to the whole organization. The benefit of that is you can overcome some of the hesitation that teams will have because you've already proved it out that it's working. So when we rolled it out to the rest of the organization, there was less resistance. And reps who thought that couldn't be achieved because they've been at the organization the whole time, and someone came in as an external rep and started really performing well on this new pricing approach, then those teams said, hey, well, I guess we can do it. And some people had phenomenal results and got promoted. In the next several months. It was really a great outcome there.
So how are the pricing strategies different based on sales cycles? So PLG, you have a lot of volume, and you're going to have that feedback pretty quick. Where enterprise, it may be 3 months, 6 months for the sales cycle, and you're not getting that feedback nearly as fast.
Yes. Yeah. So a lot of it comes down to so I would say that ability to test and refine in PLG is something the B2B motion folks wish they had. But if they what they can do in their own realm is to say, what we've got to do is be really deliberate about what problem we're trying to solve and making sure that we're pulling the right lever. Okay, so if we're hearing from the reps, hey, we're just too high priced. Well, what we can't do is just jump in and make a quick knee-jerk reaction, because you could actually cave revenue. Let's say your win rate doesn't change, your volume of deals doesn't change, but you took your price down. Well, your revenue could just implode, and so you got to think about those implications when you're adjusting pricing. So in that case, what I'd be doing is grabbing a few people together that have a lot of confidence in to go figure out what the real problem is. Do we have a value problem? Do we have a value communication problem? Is our product have some sort of issue that's not allowing us to charge these kind of prices? Are we not selling it? Are we not selling it right? Are we not presenting the price right? There's a number of things I'd be diving in and just trying to understand. Is it on the value perception side? Is it on the pricing side? And then once I feel like I've got a good handle on that, then it's like, okay, let's figure out how to make some of these changes and then get response. But some time spent early to make sure you're solving the right problem will save you a ton, because if you're solving the wrong problem, you're going to find out slower as well. In that B2B world, just because the cycle time is going to play out, and then you're like, hey, we read this wrong. Now we've got to go back and do it again.
Well, I joked about looking at competitor sites and figuring out your pricing that way, but how important is competitive analysis in pricing strategy development?
Now, I appreciated the joke, right? So I think a lot of times there's people who are, it's like, hey, I'm a product person. I've built this product. I see where the market is, and I'm just going to peg my product right with the rest of the market, or maybe a little bit below because I'm a challenger, right? I'm trying to gain some share. Right.
And you might have just seen somebody else's test.
Yes. Right. And that's exactly the point, is that, you think about it as kind of like market stewardship, right? A leader plays a role in deciding where the price should be set in their market. And they kind of have to steward that, because if you get into price wars and things, it affects everybody. And oftentimes, the buyer wins and none of the vendors do. So competitive pricing matters because that's also how your buyer's buying. It's what they're seeing. Okay. It's important backdrop for you to decide on your strategy, but it isn't the anchor to all things. So when I mentioned earlier, things like positioning yourself and potentially having a niche positioning, you're thinking about ways to set yourself apart so that you can then run a different strategic pricing play. Okay. So if you're solving a niche problem better than other people, you can charge it a premium because you're not the same thing. And then there's a perceived value difference. So, but having the backdrop of like, what's everybody else doing is going to be important, because think about, people are going to be shopping, and they're going to see price metrics in the market. Well, if you don't know what those are and yours is way out there and totally different, you better have a battle card or something ready to talk about why that's different. Or if it's a PG example, how you talk about value needs to be different. If everyone else is using, say, users, and you're on some usage basis, you need to be talking about how this is a better model. And I've seen a lot of sales teams do this effectively, where obviously their product is really valuable, but sometimes the model adds incremental value, because it's like, hey, we're not going to keep you from sharing this tool with everybody in your team. So we have free users and we charge on this other basis, right? That becomes a really, it's not the only reason to buy, but because they can speak to that differentiation and knowing the market, that can be really compelling. I would not use the pricing model as your main point of differentiation. I do see that sometimes where that kind of usually gets you into the we're cheaper type of a trap, and that isn't
Right.
a great positioning. But competitive research is something that if you aren't staying abreast of it, it's going to hurt you. And others are making moves, others are thinking through their strategies, and you need to be periodically seeing what's coming from others and what your buyers are considering. Otherwise, a lot of times it's the same kind of thing on a product side. If you're really internally focused, you're going to be missing out on a lot of things you could be solving for in the market, rather than looking at the market and the buyers and seeing what's coming on the horizon.
Like that. So how do SaaS companies tailor their pricing strategies for different market segments? And what are some of the factors they should be thinking about in that process?
Yeah, there's a couple things to consider. One is, can you actually act differently for those segments? Let's say you've identified some segments, but the way you're going to market is you have a website and everybody shops the same website. Well, you maybe
Yeah.
will do all kinds of great segmentation, but it's not allowing you to do something different, right? So if you think about a basic example would be movie theater, right? They'll have a military discount and a senior discount and a kids discount or whatever, right? So they're offering the same product, that same experience, but they're able to charge differently. So if your segments allow you to act differently because you're going to either deliver a different offering, maybe you just haven't, but you have these segments, maybe you should be thinking about that. And often that can be in the form of packaging. And you're saying, hey, only certain things matter to this segment versus this segment. But right now they're all going to the same product, right? So often that can open up levers for monetization and product development if you're addressing those segments differently. But I've also seen a lot of time and effort spent and a lot of data analysis spent where, hey, we're selling the same thing through the same channels to everyone. And here's all these different ways to slice it by geography and by channel purchased and by industry that they're in. But at the same time, you can't do anything about that. And so you want to say, okay, what do we actually want to hope? What do we hope to be able to do from these segments so we can activate against them?
Well, where can people learn more about you and about Maple Street and IGS Insights online?
Yeah, I mean, you can go to igsinsights.com. You can also reach out on LinkedIn. I'm out there, and I'd love to talk to folks.
Yeah, everybody should definitely follow Pat. You got some great content on LinkedIn, and IGS is a fantastic company.
Yeah.
So we'll make sure and link all of that in the show notes.
Great.
Pat, great conversation. Super helpful today. I appreciate you being on SaaS Fuel. Thanks again, Pat, for coming on the show and wrapping up SaaS Pricing Week in an incredible way, and sharing your insights and resources. You can learn more about Pat and Maple Street IGS at igsinsights.com. As always, all links, highlights, resources, and full show notes are available at saasfuel.com. And be sure to check us out on YouTube. It's at Champion Leadership. We've got full podcast episodes, video shorts, training, some outtakes, all kinds of great stuff out there on YouTube. Thought leaders share. I'll bet you're one of those. Share this episode this week with another founder who doesn't want to raise prices in a time of economic uncertainty. And again, that's probably all of us. It makes people crazy thinking about changing pricing. This is so important to talk about this. If you missed last episode of this one, share both of those with other founders, because it's such a hot topic, such an important topic for our revenue and for our growth. This episode will definitely be super helpful. And of course, they'll think you're a genius for having the inside scoop. Everyone who shares this week gets a swagger sticker. Stick it on to every proposal and instantly exude the confidence of a rock star, because when you know your value, the price tag, that's just a detail. The real question, which rock star will you be? Join us next Tuesday where our founder is Randy Wooten, CEO of Maxio. He will share powerful insights from 20 plus years of scaling SaaS companies and driving strategic growth at industry giants like Microsoft, Salesforce, and Rocket Fuel. And we'll talk about the merger of SaaS Optics and Chargeify to become Maxio and that whole rebrand into Maxio. So, quite a story there. And then next week on our SaaS Fuel Expert Series, we have Naomi Soman, master marketing storyteller and weaver of irresistible true tales. She'll be with us to talk about how to craft your superhero origin story so that ideal clients want to help you conquer the market and save the world. I will see you next time, and as always, enjoy the journey.
Thanks for listening to SaaS Fuel. Full show notes for each episode, which includes a summary, key takeaways, quotes, and any resources mentioned, are available at saasfuel.com. Be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're enjoying the content and getting value from these episodes, please leave us a rating and review at ratethispodcast.com/SaaSFuel. We'll be sure to read these out on future episodes.